Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in. Again, I am Kaylee Batesman, the content director at SheCanCode, and today we are discussing what a seat at the table at Outrider looks like. I'm lucky enough to have not one, but two incredible ladies from Outrider with me today. I have Londonne and Ramya, who are here to share their own experiences and to offer advice on how to secure a seat at the table and to keep your seat at the table in a male-dominated industry. Welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us on Spilling the Tea today.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon.
It's a pleasure to have you both. Thank you both for taking time out of your busy day. Can we kick off with a bit of background about both of you, your roles at Outrider and how you got into the tech industry? Ramya, should we start with you?
Sure. I am a software engineer on the motion planning and controls team at Outrider. I've been in STEM my whole life. I got an aerospace engineering PhD, and after my PhD, I was looking for a job that was exciting and fun for me. And I wanted to be specific and pointed about finding a job where I would be a good fit. So I had a couple internships, fellowships type things, and I came to Outrider on my first tech internship. And I really liked it. I think it was fun, exciting, fast-paced. I was never bored, and I think that was big for me. And so I decided to stay, and so now here I am. I also want to add that I was a part of the local Women in Robotics chapter, and that's where I met someone at Outrider, Mallory, who introduced me to the company and how things work, and she helped me get a foot in the door, which is so important, right? Because you always need to know someone to get a job. So I am really grateful for women's groups, local women's groups that helped me break into tech.
Our listeners are going to love the fact that you come from a STEM background and the fact as well that you said you love your job and you are never ever bored. That STEM and the tech industry has this really bad PR issue where everybody thinks a job in tech is going to be very dry and boring. And we'd love it on Spilling the Tea when our ladies say they come from a STEM background and they absolutely love where they work and what they do. You coming from a STEM background, what was that? Was that someone at school or someone at home? What kind of encouraged that? Did you take things apart at home? Were you that child?
Yeah, I guess like I've always been like a science, math focused child. I wanted to be an astronaut when I was younger, which is like what everybody wants to do when they're 5. And I feel like you just kind of fall into things, right? And when I went to college, I decided I would do like an aerospace engineering major, and I just stuck with it. So I got my bachelor's, master's, and PhD. Because I enjoyed research and I enjoyed learning about new exciting things, and that's kind of what I've been looking for my whole life, is just like continually being challenged and being excited about my job or my studies or whatever it is. So yeah, I feel like I've kind of been interested in it my whole life.
Yeah, amazing. And Londonne yourself, what was your journey into tech and your journey into Outrider?
So my name is Londonne Corder. I run marketing here at Outrider. That includes both marketing and communications activities. And my job is to not only build the category of yard automation, but also build the brand of Outrider. We have a very strong and impressive brand, and I want to continue that as we grow as a company and as an industry around yard automation.
Amazing. And you have quite a background in marketing. Did you ever think, well, I mean, when you were young, did you ever think I'd be working in the tech industry? Is that something that you thought as a young child, I'd love to work in that particular industry? Or what were your thoughts before you fell in?
Well, my career started in consumer public relations, which is a far cry from technology. And in the exciting time of the e-commerce boom in the late 90s, early 2000s, I got the technology itch. And so I used e-commerce as my bridge from consumer PR to technology. And I never looked back. I love B2B marketing. It's exciting taking what the engineers are building and the complexity behind that and making it simple and easy for salespeople to sell and buyers to buy.
Yeah, I'd like to add that, like, I think being at Outrider and having my relationship with London, because we have such different backgrounds, has really helped give me perspective on like how industries operate and how this specific company operates, which is really cool, right? Because like as engineers, we're normally like heads down in code or research or whatever it is, and it's very nice to look up, see the bigger picture, and see all the work that is needed to make a product, and have it go to market, right? So yeah, I think that's really cool, and I'm really grateful to have had that experience, to have more perspective at Outrider.
And Ramya, in your experience, how did you find it breaking into the tech industry? Because companies are always saying they're crying out for talent. What was your experience when you tried to get into the industry?
I think that's an interesting question. I think because I've been in a STEM background my entire life, it seemed almost like a parallel path that was easy to take, breaking into tech. I think it was really helpful to have peers that gave me perspective and insight into the tech industry, like what I could expect as I broke into tech, right? And also, I mentioned this earlier, that I was a part of the Women in Robotics chapter, which was really helpful because I was able to meet women in Boulder and Denver and talk to them about what it means to work in tech, like what the day-to-day looks like. And I think for me, I want to be pointed about the opportunities that I'm pursuing and that I'm interested in. And it just seemed like a good fit for me. So I think it would have been difficult if I didn't have a foot in the door with the people that I knew. So I think that's really important to like build community in the place that you're living in or online, and gather more information about what tech is.
And it leads me on to what obstacles did you navigate as a woman in your field of expertise? You mentioned a little bit there about sometimes say you went for an interview and you found that the interviewing panel perhaps didn't look like you or couldn't relate to you as a female. How, is it those types of obstacles that you had to overcome, and anything else along the way that you found?
So I feel like as a woman, it sometimes feels like you're being evaluated on a different set of rules, right? Which is disheartening, and figuring out these rules, that's just hard if you're not already in the industry. And even when you're in the industry, it's like, it's a lot of work. And also it's hard not seeing people like you around. Like most people feel comfortable, like being around people they look like. And so it's really difficult when you are the only woman in the room, or if you're being interviewed by just people, like just men. I think it's just difficult to feel comfortable. And speaking up was never something that came easy for me. I feel like just general societal expectations, there's been a lot of mixed messaging that gets put on women, and that makes it really hard to be assertive in the corporate world. And all of this together like creates this multi-dimensional barrier to entry, and barrier to success, because you have to be very specific and pointed about identifying and seeking opportunities. You don't necessarily tend to like fall upwards, right? And I think that was kind of my general experience as, as a woman, and the obstacles that I had to navigate, just being very mindful of what's happening around me, what my rules are, how I behave. All of this together creates this multidimensional barrier to entry. And I feel like that was kind of my experience, as like the different obstacles that I had to navigate in my specific field, and just learning new rules and learning and understanding and absorbing the environment to figure out how I would exist or behave or be productive in the environment.
Yes, yes, I agree. In terms of those obstacles, do you think they are changing? Do you think they've changed over the years or have improved slightly for women, you would hope?
I mean, I'm very early in my career, so like I think that's a difficult question for me to offer, but I harbor just a lot of optimism around the people that are entering the workforce right now. Like, this is a new age in the corporate world, right? We have a lot of younger millennials, Gen Z people in the workforce who are just changing the status quo, changing what it means to be workers in the corporate world, what it means to be professional, what it means to be just how people work. And I think that change is for the better, right? And I'm hoping that this radical new energy opens up all of these different avenues for all people to feel welcome, whether they're women, whether they have a different style of working that isn't acceptable, like currently acceptable, right? Like, everybody deserves to feel like they have a place in the tech industry or wherever in the corporate world they need to be. And I feel like just having more women in the workplace, having more diverse people in the workplace, creates this environment where everyone benefits, because I feel like I've noticed that having women just makes like, women give space for everyone to speak. Women are very mindful about like letting everyone share their thoughts, which is really nice just for the team in general, right? Like, having diversity of thought and having different ideas and different people speaking makes everyone feel valued, and you are very productive as a team because you're getting these different perspectives. So I feel like I am just very optimistic about what's going to happen.
Yeah. And surely as well, you stay longer as well. When you find yourself in a company that is like that, you're not job hopping, you're thinking, actually, this is a team that really listens, this is a team that really works well together. So you're going to stay there longer, and good companies that are doing that can work on retaining their talent a little bit easier than companies that are just not thinking about it at all.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, you want to be happy at your job, you want to be excited at your job, and that's where your intrinsic motivation comes from, or else you just get bored and sad and you don't want to work anymore.
Exactly. London, I mean, we've spoken there a little bit about breaking into the industry, but what happens when you're actually in and you're at the table? How, as a woman, how do you make your voice heard in a male-dominated industry, and how do you feel like you can keep your seat at that table?
Yeah, so in my early career, it was full of strong female leaders all the way to the top. So really didn't have to think about that all too much. It wasn't until I moved into tech, and especially when I've got into the more senior VP and director roles, that I really started to notice the glass ceiling still existed in technology. And that was a moment where, I really re-energized my commitment to helping women grow into leadership roles. And that involved getting involved in Elevate, which is a professional women's group. I ran several women's groups within companies, and I'm an executive sponsor of Outrider's women's group. And so it was just really, how do I catalyze not only my own momentum to get to a senior level, but also bring others along? And that's where we really see the gap, on a macro level. We have a lot of women coming in our entry positions, and very few in our middle management, and even fewer in our higher level executive positions. And so how do we create growth paths for those folks? Coming back to your original question, once you have a seat at the table, I think there's been, for me personally, two big challenges in being heard. The first one was, constantly being interrupted by, my counterparts. And so I started in meetings just saying, Michael, you interrupted me, I will finish my thought. And that was really powerful, right? I just looked right in the person's eye and said that. And second was people taking credit for my ideas, my good points, etc. So I started using a phrase my executive coach, Julie Halunga, taught me, which is, I'm so glad you agree with me, Joe. And it was so great collaborating with you. We made a great team, you covering X and my contribution on Y. And so it's sort of like taking back ownership of things in the room, in the presence of others, without diminishing, the other person. And that takes, when you first start, it takes courage, it takes confidence. And, the more you do it, the easier it gets. I know there's a lot of controversy around, how scientifically valid Amy Cuddy's, power positions are. But as I was making the transition into a higher level role, I would go into the bathroom and do my power positions. And it just take some deep breaths, give yourself some great self-talk, and then go in strong. I mean, it can be really intimidating being in a room of investors and, executives, and being the only woman in the room. And you just have to be able to hold the room.
Yes. I love that. I mean, you started off by saying, actually, I didn't feel that until I went into the tech industry, which is for those of us that work in it, for the ladies that work in it, because we know there are fantastic jobs within here, and and I hear that constantly, to hear ladies that come in and feel like suddenly they get here and they think there is a problem. And also, though, that you remembered to not pull the ladder up behind you. And actually think back and think, this is how I felt when I joined the tech industry. What else can I do for other ladies coming in? Because it's so important that ladies, once you are in and you find that you had an experience yourself, that you help other ladies going forward. So, fantastic that you was part of so many groups to help other ladies there.
I think I kind of want to add that, the whole mentorship aspect of things has been really helpful for me as someone who's in their early career, right? Because all I'm trying to do is gather as much information as possible to make decisions about my career, about my projects, whatever it is. And it's really helpful to have someone in your corner, especially someone like London, who's so higher up, right? And it's really helpful to have her give me advice like, hey, you should do this. And so just having that community is so nice. I think as someone earlier in their career, hearing London talk about having strong, powerful women all the way to the top, I am having that experience with London, and it's so nice to see someone so you can be like, okay, I want to be there, right? Yeah.
And a great sponsor as well. I mean, a mentor is one thing, but somebody to have your back or name drop you as a great person when you're not in the room, that senior person that's always there saying, you know what, actually this person on the team is great, you might want to consider her. Which I know a lot of ladies really struggle to find great sponsors, because sometimes you're not lucky enough to have that senior lady above you anyway. So that can be quite difficult in itself. London, you mentioned a little bit about when you went into the bathroom and you think about power poses, and then you sort of talk to yourself about that self-doubt. I wanted to touch upon that. How did you combat any imposter syndrome and stop those thoughts of self-doubt?
Self-doubt is probably the most common characteristic that I run into with all the women that I work with at every stage.
Mm-hmm.
And the most important thing is to have a trusted person in your life
Mm-hmm.
that you can go and run things through. I said I had an executive coach at one time, Julie, and she would always tell me, like, is that a story you're telling yourself, or is that truly what's happening?
Yeah.
And every time I question myself and my capabilities, I ask myself that question. So that's like level one. Level two, having somebody to bounce things off of is really important. It's sort of like, hey, am I thinking about this right? And have someone be able to respond. And then thirdly, I think women can be very self-critical, and that holds them back, or they just don't want to jump right in and take the reins because they don't think they're good enough, or don't have an experience enough, or it's not the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's my job to push a little bit and question those assumptions that our women have, and think about something from a different perspective. And sometimes I get myself in trouble. Sometimes I push too hard. But I had people push me, and I have never regretted that happening. So we had one woman here who, one of her growth areas was, speaking in front of a big group.
Mm-hmm.
And she had told an amazing story to our women's group. And I thought, oh my God, the whole company needs to know about this. And so, in a matter of 24, 48 hours, she was at our all hands speaking to 200 people about her accomplishment and why it was significant to the company. And so I'm willing to throw it out. I just need to make sure women will catch it.
I love that. I feel like, well, this comes back to like having someone in your corner. And I love that London was very like clear about like having a level 1, level 2, level 3.
Yeah.
I might be a little more hand wavy and add to like London's level 1 comment that it's always, I think personally, it was really helpful for me to just have hard evidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like talking to yourself when you're your own enemy is just hard. So just like clear, neutral thoughts about your accomplishments, about anything that you've been told in the past that would support what you're doing right now. Like, hey, I have X degree, or I was told X by my past manager. And that's like, you can't really dispute that, right?
Yeah.
And just being like, just treating yourself that way and just being like, okay, so here's hard neutral evidence that I belong here and that I deserve to be here. And yeah, I do think that's helpful. Just tying it back to like the level 1 step of what London said. I think that's helpful to like further reinforce that thought process.
Surely that must happen as well more often now, because we have the opportunity to work hybridly and remote. And you might have those moments where you think, actually, if I were in an office and I could just chat with somebody about how I might be feeling. When you're at home sometimes on your own, that can really sink in, and you think, oh, it's just me and my thoughts. And and you do have those where you have to, I love the advice you gave there, London, about just checking, is that just a story that you're telling yourself? And you're right, Ramya, just thinking, actually, do I have hard evidence of something that is happening, or is it just me not being very kind to myself today?
Yeah, I agree.
Spoken a little bit about having a voice within the company, and I wanted to talk to you both a little bit about your when it comes to your superpower. What is your superpower when it comes to taking up space in the company? Have you found something yourself so far?
I think superpower is a very complex, heavy word. I'd like to, and just speaking about like imposter syndrome, I'd like to think very little about my specific qualities and more about like, how do I reinforce what I'm bringing to the room, right? And I think, and how do I feel comfortable in a room? Because I think for most women, if they feel comfortable and if they speak up, that's the barrier to entry. And then they're good. And then everything they're saying makes sense. It's clear, concise, good questions, adds a lot of value to the discussion. But I feel like that initial, like, not feeling comfortable in a room, not feeling like you belong, really affects like how you speak up, right? And I think for me, it's just this enthusiasm and positivity, even when I don't feel like it. Just convince yourself to be like, I'm enthusiastic, I'm positive, and I'm going to lean heavily into the things that I am good at. So if those are the things I'm good at, those are the things I feel comfortable doing, I'm going to do it, even if that's not necessarily what is quote unquote like expected. Because like I feel like there is a certain air of like seriousness sometimes in big rooms where you're like, oh, should I even say this? But yes, like I think that kind of adds to the self-doubt aspect of it. As long as you're like, this is my thing, I like being exciting and open and loud and enthusiastic, I'm going to stick to that. And that really helps me feel like I can, take control and speak and provide my thoughts on the situation. I think also as someone kind of in my early career, I want to be very mindful about like listening before I speak too, because I understand that I don't have all the information that I would probably need to like make a lot more cohesive thoughts about a project or about a certain situation. And so like just being very mindful about listening and then responding to comments or responding to what you've just listened to in a very clear, neutral, assertive, concise way. So I think those are the two things that I tend to focus on.
Yeah, I have a saying that speaking up and feedback is not optional, it's expected. And the thing about that point of view is that you have to be at the right company that embraces that mentality. It took me a long time to find Outrider. I consider the executive team that I'm on my tribe, and we emulate that, and we try to make sure that that trickles down to the entire company. And so that's really important, to be able to be, the environment is inviting you to be heard, listened to, respected, open to feedback. Applying that feedback is probably the more critical part. Bi-directional coaching. So my team members, we give each other feedback all the time. We give each other advice, and we lift each other up. I think you can get into companies that are very political from the top down, where, you're trying to tear each other down rather than build each other up. And that doesn't really happen at the executive team level. And again, it's something we hope is trickling down through the organization.
Yeah, I love the fact that you both mentioned there about speaking up and how you speak up. Because London, you touched upon that earlier about how you respond to somebody in a meeting, and to have at least something in your back pocket to be able to come back with a response and not seem like it was just a reaction that you just said something out of anger. I was speaking with a lady recently. She works in tech sales, and she said being in a male-dominated department in a male-dominated industry is very interesting, because when she speaks up, she said, I'm always called direct, and I'm always told I'm direct compared to everybody else. But she said, I don't think I'm any different. But it's just being a lady sometimes speaking up in the room, and feeling like you're reacting to something. She said that's always interesting to work in sales as a woman as well.
I think as you get later in your career, you start to run into this concept of the double bind, which is, on one hand, you're getting the message, take credit for all the stuff you're doing. And then on the other hand is like, no, you need to be inclusive and it needs to be we did it all. But, and so you have these conflicting messages coming at you, particularly in your middle career, where you're trying to, be, the individual contributor, but you're also trying to get into management, and you've got all these conflicting messages. And my heart goes out to women in their middle career, for lots of different reasons, because it's a tough part of your journey.
Mm-hmm.
I thought my early career, like yours, Ramya, was hard, but when you reach that transitionary point,
Mm-hmm.
It's tough.
Yeah.
You're juggling a lot of things, and you have to find a company that is gonna, respect what's going on in your personal life, what you want to achieve with your professional life, and how do you find that balance?
And that is it, really. So many ladies say that it's finding the right company and then feeling like you can stay with that company and grow with that company.
Early on in my career, you had to really not be yourself in order to move up. And what I mean by that is, you had to be able to relate to men in order to get to the next level in your career. And that sometimes meant doing things that weren't natural for you. So one of those was like, I learned to play golf, and I started following, American football. And so I could have these, proverbial water cooler talks and relate to those folks who had power and influence over my career. Also, I went the extra mile. I always prepared conversation topics for dinners and, all kinds of like extra things that I thought would help me influence these folks. And the nice thing about today's world is that you don't have to be something you're not. And that is super refreshing. You don't have to pretend.
I think that's like as a direct result of people like you in the exec team, right? Like,
because not emulating everything that you saw, because then you get stuck in that loop of just that masculine energy in being a manager. And you're right, just being authentic, London, means that things change.
Exactly.
Just like having that mentorship, not even mentorship, but it's just like, just having people tell you it's okay to do what you want to do. It's okay to have girly interests, right? Like, it's okay to have like a pink desk mat and I'm sure, like, I did not exist during this time in the corporate world, but I am sure that wasn't like something that was super acceptable, and women were like told to fit a mold and all the other things London said. So I am optimistic and very grateful to people like London who have created this environment where I can do what I want to do and still have big managerial leadership goals and be able to manage a team, hopefully in the future, that way.
Yes. And on that note, I wanted to talk a bit about how Outrider supports and uplifts women's voices, and a little bit about your company culture and how you empower your female employees, because it doesn't sound like you have that problem. Do you have groups where ladies can share their experiences? How does that work at Outrider?
So at Outrider, we have a ERG group called the Women of Outrider. It's open to anyone in the company to participate in. It's been going on, I think, for about 4 years. It started out more as a loose knit group, and just recently we've formalized it. And Ramya is actually one of our co-presidents, which is very exciting to have her in that leadership role. And she's done a phenomenal job, like finding the right balance of, work, work of the committee, always having a growth conversation in those meetings. Right now we're focused on emotional intelligence for a four meeting series on that. And then I love that Ramya also said, hey, we don't really connect with each other more on a social individual basis. So Ramya instituted these Women of Outrider Friday happy hours. Thank you. So women at Outrider really do have each other's backs. That's one of our cultural pillars. And I think that my role in it is that I want to get to know these women so that I can help be an evangelist for their career trajectory at Outrider. The more I know about what they want to do, what they're accomplishing, etc., I can be a voice from the executive level down, to get them in positions they deserve to be in. And so we had one woman who is just incredibly talented engineer, like early to starting her middle career, I think. And I got to know her, and I finally went to the CTO and I said, you have got to take this woman under your wing and mentor her into some higher level positions. And he did that, and they're working together closely, and she's getting more and more visibility in the company and leadership roles as a result. So I want to use my proverbial power and influence to get our women where they deserve to be.
Yeah, I think Outrider really succeeds in being mindful of creating welcoming spaces. And the Women of Outrider group was one of the deciding factors for me to join Outrider, because I was an intern here first and I was still looking, and I had a couple offers. So Outrider really succeeds in being mindful of creating these welcoming spaces. And as I was weighing my options for jobs, I think one of the reasons I came here was because of the Women of Outrider Employee Resource Group. I think it's a great way to develop skills that you're not taught, right? And I feel like all of these quote unquote insider knowledge that you just don't know, right? You don't know how to be in a leadership role. You don't know how to lead. You don't know who to talk to or how you bring up that conversation, what point in your career you bring up that conversation. All of those things that I feel like men tend to have these groups, right? That I've never been a part of, but somehow everybody seems to know what to do and I don't. So I think it's really helpful to have that and be okay, someone's telling me what to do. And so I can also move on to like London said, middle and upper management executive roles, and know the magic formula to do that.
Yeah.
Yes. Because I wanted to touch upon that and how your colleagues and managers have invested in your own success at Outrider. And some people, some managers, I have heard before, they almost don't want to invest in certain ladies' success because they don't want them to go on to another level, or they don't want them to go on to another company and do well, which is just bizarre to hear. But great companies know how to invest in their employees, and even if that lady does move on, she'll always think of you when she's moving jobs again, because great companies always have employees come back to them at some point when they've moved on and got new skills and new experiences. They always come back. And I worked for a company that did that, and so many people would leave for a few years and think, actually I want to go back to there now, I've learned extra things. So I suppose it's creating that culture, isn't it, where you all help each other along the way instead of trying to stunt each other's growth, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that there are a couple of things that have just bothered me over the years on, you know, what was holding women back. And two of them are, you don't have the soft skills and you're not strategic enough.
Yeah.
And so those, you kind of go like, well, what does that even mean? And who's going to teach me those things?
Yeah.
Where men have been groomed with those things their whole career.
Yeah.
And so you have to find people who can define what those are for you.
Yes.
And then emulate and give you tools to start using them. And, you know, I think Ramya, you're spot on. Like, we have to have these communities where we can go figure these things out, because no one has taught us those things. And when you don't learn those things up front, like soft skills, emotional intelligence, strategic thinking, it elongates your career trajectory, or your ability to move from level to level gets longer, where men have been groomed for those things, so they tend to move quickly. And, you know, caveat, like, I know we're making some pretty global statements about men and women here, and that's not always the case. One of the things that's elated and excited me is that even though there are only 2 women on the executive team of 7, there our men have daughters, young daughters. And I think they know what their daughters are going to come up against. So they're always actively working to make the corporate world, particularly Outrider, welcoming and inviting to women, because they can see in their mind's eye the place they want their daughters to work. And so that's really been refreshing for that point of view.
Yeah, I like that way of thinking. I almost, in a very, like, I wish that people didn't have to have daughters to think about it that way, you know, like, but I think London's very correct in that Outrider does a good job of, like, having executive leadership, especially because I think it has London, and London makes, like, a big effort to, like, do all of these things. But also
setting that example as well to everybody else to follow
right?
suit, even the male allies.
Yeah, and I think 2 things that I kind of want to add to that is, like, you're right, having a good manager, like, makes or breaks everything. Like, another reason I came here is, like, my manager has been really supportive and helpful in, like, finding ways for me to grow, being my advocate, and just pushing for that. And I think, like, finding someone who's in your corner is, like, really, really helpful and really crucial to, like, career growth. And also, like, I think, like, everyone at Outrider is, like, a girl's girl, you know, like, we're all, like, it's community, right? Like, no one's, like, tearing each other down. And honestly, I would even put, like, a lot of men in this category where, like, they're allies. And I think it's helpful for women to use these allies, especially in situations where they don't have other women, which is, like, a lot of places. So asking for support from these allies, like, being very clear that, like, hey, this is the situation I'm in. This is the support I need you to give me in X meeting, in X project, to help me succeed and move forward. And just being clear and open, I think, like, has worked for me in the past, and I'm hoping will continue to work for me in the future. So yeah, use your allies, all kinds of allies, and make them, and educate about, like, what it means to be, like, a woman in these situations. Most of the time, I don't think anyone's actively being ignorant. I think it's just not something that's crossed their mind, which is fair, because, like, humans go after experiences that they've had, right? So that's not an experience you've had, it's just hard. So just educating, being vocal, And if a company doesn't serve you, right, maybe it's time to move on to a better manager and a better company that will support you in the way that I think I'm being supported here, right?
Yeah, I love the fact that you mentioned managers, because you are right, and the saying is people don't leave jobs, they leave managers, because if you don't get on with your manager, then you are going to go elsewhere. So you're absolutely right there. So on that note, how does Outrider differ from other employers?
As I mentioned earlier, I think finding a company that is the right fit for you is the most important thing. Outrider might not be the best fit for someone, right? If someone is looking for a big corporate environment where, you know, it's very methodical, very pragmatic, you know, those kinds of things, Outrider would not be the right place. If you're looking for high intensity, you know, hard driving, dealing with ambiguity at times, you know, that is for other people. My advice would be get really good at screening for fit when you interview at companies, and it's not easy. It's one of those, it's really one of those really tough things. But make sure you get questions like, what does your day look like here? Or what do you do outside of work? Or, you know, what is the social atmosphere like at your company? In addition to just asking, you know, you have these values on your website. Give me a couple of examples of, you know, how you've seen those demonstrated. And then you'll really start to be able to dial in, like, is that a good place for you? Is this a good manager for me? So at the end of the day, screen for fit.
I like that. And I think, like, as someone who recently joined Outrider, like I said in the beginning that I like excitement, and Outrider has a lot of excitement. It is a little chaotic sometimes, but I think chaos breeds good leaders, right?
Yes.
Because you want people to lead someone through the chaos. And I think it's helpful for me to be in this environment because that's kind of what I want to do and where I see my career going. But I think London's very right that, like, everybody deserves a place where they feel comfortable, confident, where they feel like their personal life balances their professional life, and just generally happy with the work that they're doing. So I think it's very, very smart, like for your own mental health and for your general productivity and the value you add to a company, that it works both ways, that you like them and they like you.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of your secret there.
Which is as really changed since the pandemic as well, and that companies know that they have to meet people halfway, at least on certain things, because good talent, as we said before, will just go elsewhere nowadays and find a company that they think works for them. So it's about finding those ladies and retaining them as well, and the trick is just finding a really good company. I could talk to you all afternoon on this subject, but we are already out of time. So Ramya and London, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day for coming and have a chat with us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kaylee.
And for everybody listening, thank you so much for joining us as always, and we hope to see you again next time.